And for our didactic this month, we have the amazing Lianna Gliksman, who's been in our community for a very long time, I think since we started. Um, and this is her first presentation to us, and I'm so excited, and I can't wait to learn with everybody else. Thanks, Lianna.
Thank you. I'm finally doing it. All right. So I am going to be presenting on, sorry, let me, sensory regulation. Is it presenting the correct screen?
Right now, we have like your whole screen.
Awesome. Um, present. All right. There? Cool. So this is me trying very briefly to go over a very long guide. So please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to leave a bunch of time at the end. Hopefully, I'm going to try really hard so we can get into more questions where you guys want to get more in depth instead of me just kind of choosing an area that I think is interesting and going on because I think it's all interesting. Um, I'm a neurodivergent clinician, primarily working with neurodivergent clients, especially autism, ADHD, OCD giftedness. Little brief outline of how we're going to do it, example, and then choose your own adventure. Um, I'm going to start with giving you guys this chart. I can't see everybody, but is everyone familiar with polyvagal and this chart specifically? Anyone want a second to look at it? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs. Um, is there anything I'm missing, or are we all comfortable with it? I'm gonna make the assumption and go. This is my interpretation of polyvagal. So, while I love this one, I think there's a few problems with it. The red, yellow, green is a minor thing, but I could not get past it, and it's really the main reason that I made the new one. But it implies that there is a good state, a bad state, a go, stop, and it's just not that simple. They're all different states. They all have a survival purpose. Sometimes the most helpful state is going to be in freeze. That's not dysregulated. Our goal of our nervous system is just to seek stasis with our environment, make sure we're safe. And then the other thing with this is that it's not this pretty arc where you have to go through the sympathetic system to go up here. And then if you want to calm down from that, you have to go back through it. It can be a lot of the time, but it's definitely not always the case. So that's where we got this. There's no lines. We're always going to be somewhere in between. It's kind of like yin and yang. And this is the visual that I have in my head whenever I'm working with clients. My goal is just to figure out where is the client and where do they want to be? Is this the most helpful nervous system state for them? So I'll give you guys a second to look at that and then maybe a second to ask questions because this is where I would love a lot of input too. I've been working on this for a while and it's 90% what I want, but not completely. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, cool. Um, the big thing I want to note here, one, this isn't bad. We have more survival focus. Grounded can be more alert or less alert. It could be excited or it could be meditative. And then also looking at capacity. So our ability to access optimal behavioral, cognitive, and emotional functioning. If somebody is in a state of hyperarousal, that means that it's going to be a lot harder for them to use their cognitive functioning and do some really in-depth exercise. So just to keep that in mind, I'll talk about capacity a lot. This is the hierarchy for capacity that I use. It's based off Taylor-Trott sensory pyramid of learning. It's based on how we develop different levels of functioning, but it's also about which ones to go first. So when we're looking at our central nervous system functioning, the most basic is our sensory regulation. And within that, it's going to be, according to them, tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. It is only when we feel more comfortable with these that we're going to have more access to our emotional regulation, behavioral regulation, and cognitive functioning. Um, yeah, so this is another one of those images that I just always kind of have in the back of my mind. Does anyone have questions on this one? Yeah, Britt.
I'm sorry, I definitely accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, you're
But
good.
I am so glad to be here and to be learning. So I
Thank
just
you.
great opportunity for me to be like, hey, this is great. Keep going.
I'm so nervous about doing that all the time. I really get it.
Oops, might be.
It was a nice lighthearted little break. All right.
Um,
So,
Before you
mhm,
go on,
yeah,
Megan had in the chat, I love these. The last one, I'm curious about the language of higher functioning, maybe cognitive functioning or wider range of adaptive responses, though that's a bit wordy.
I would love to talk about more after. Yeah, so actually, even with capacity, when we talk about range of functioning, you have better survival capacity. So that isn't even fully it, but it is something along those lines. Um, Thank you. I would love to talk about that more, or if you could even email me, because I want to remember that. So, sensory processing, it's going to be broken up into three main pieces, but the big thing we want to look at how we experience, interpret, and respond to environmental stimuli. When we say sensory stimuli, it's just what's going on in our environment and in our body as part of our environment. First aspect is going to be registration. So that's our ability to detect and filter out, oh, well, this is a noise, and this noise is coming from that corner. Acuity, how intensely we experience that sensation. So I can really, really hear that noise. And then response. Oh, sorry. How is that affecting our body? Are we having a pleasant experience with it, or is it unpleasant? And then within that, is it going to be more calming or alerting? I'm going to touch on the calming and alerting variable because I think it's a really important one. Oh no, what happened? Okay, here is a visual example of calming versus alerting input. You'll see on the left, we have the calming side. On the right, we have the alerting side. There's going to be different variables that tend to make input more calming or alerting. It's going to come down to the intensity, frequency, duration, and some other things. With visual input, it's going to tend to be, everyone's experiencing it differently as well, but people tend to experience visual input as more calming if there's less clutter, if there's more muted colors, more pastel colors, and then also with that nature, ocean, landscape. Visual input tends to be more alerting if there's more clutter, if there's more bright colors, and then if there's higher contrast in colors. So I like both of these. I mean, I made both of these sides. So obviously I like both of them. But if I'm in the mood to watch an ocean and you try and give me the explosion, I'm not going to resonate with it. I might really want pleasant visual input. And I find both of these very pleasant, but they have different purposes, right? So that's where we really want to look at what type of input are we using to help our clients regulate? And do they need that more alerting or do they need that more calming? I think also, especially with therapy, we tend to focus on calming input for grounding people. And for a lot of the people we see, for me especially, if you try and give me very calming meditation with not a lot of input, my mind is going to go. Now I'm thinking about what I need to do later today. I'm anxious and I'm irritated that I have to sit here. If I can have some more alerting input, like if you can give me a really cool visual to look at while I'm trying to meditate, now it's enough that maybe I can stay engaged. So that's my little disclaimer on that one. Then we have the three hidden senses. Well, we have our five main senses, everyone knows: auditory, visual, olfactory, gustatory, and tactile. I almost forgot the last one. And then we have the three hidden senses. I'm only doing one slide on each of these. If you want to talk about them more later, I would love to, because they're so much fun and it's really insulting to only give them a slide, but that's what we got today. So first we have proprioception. Our proprioceptive system is responsible for our sense of body awareness. Our receptors are in our muscles, joints, and connective tissues, so it's really always going to be activated. It's every time I'm moving, I'm activating it, but it's also how I'm feeling the pressure of the chair on my leg is activating my proprioceptive system. So even if you're completely still, it's still going to be activated. This is a very cool and important system because it's the hardest one to overstimulate. Um, I always go to new parents with overstimulation, but you might have a new parent that's very musical. They really get a lot out of having pleasant auditory input to regulate, but they have a kid and they've been hearing crying all day, and there is no amount of pleasant that's going to want to make them hear more noise. However, it's a little different with proprioception because it's pretty hard to get tired of pleasantly being aware of your body, right? So if you're having a really good time in your body, it's hard to get to a point of, I don't want to have a good time in my body anymore. So I always use proprioceptive sports in my crisis plans, safety plans. These are the go-to skills. On the other side, sign someone struggling with proprioceptive input. I don't know. I just decided that would be my other fun fact to include about proprioception. Oh, mostly because I wanted to talk about history of self-injury. This is my really important kind of disclaimer that if you take away something from this, I would love it to be this point. I see a lot of neurodivergent people, sensory divergency in general, where when they're really overwhelmed or overstimulated, the only way that they know how to regulate themselves and bring themselves back to a more grounded place is by doing something that's going to look like they're hurting themselves. A lot of people are going to do it in more touch sensitive parts of their body. So you'll see people hitting their head, banging their head, maybe hitting their head on something, punching hands or thighs. There's going to be a lot of different stuff. And that's often seen as, well, they're being manipulative. Oh, well, they just don't care about their own safety or their own health. All of these things, when really it's the opposite. You know, this person's body is saying the only way I know how to feel present in my body is to give me some really intense body awareness input. And so that's what they're going to do. In those situations, the most helpful thing we can do is give them a more proactive proprioception regulation plan. I'm happy to talk about that more later, but we really want to look at that intense proprioceptive input. So that could be things like chewing gum, lifting weights. There's no way to get into all of this with one slide. Happy to talk about that more later, though. Very important. Then we have vestibular system. This is our sense of movement and balance. It's our spatial orientation. Receptors are in our inner ear. So every time we move our heads, we're getting vestibular input. This system is very easy to overload. A lot of people have motion sickness, or maybe I just feel that way because I do. But I think it's pretty easy to overload. And it's going to be very, very tied into proprioception because both of them are going to be engaged in, I mean, almost everything, but with a lot of those movement activities. So just another note that we want to look at. If we're noticing somebody's a little bit more sensitive to vestibular input, we really want to take that into consideration when we're doing that proprioception planning with them. Sign someone struggling with it, and then the themes for the pleasant or unpleasant or calming versus alerting. So calming vestibular input would be things like rocking, gentle swaying. I don't know why I don't have it here, but it's in a linear motion. If somebody's moving in a linear motion, that's going to tend to be more calming. If it's a circular spinning or erratic motion, that's going to tend to be more alerting. And then introception. This one is hours long worth of information. It's really, really fun and cool and interesting. And if you don't know about it, I would highly recommend you check out Kelly Mahler. I use her YouTube videos to explain interoception to people a lot of the time. This is how we interpret our internal body signals. It's how we know if we're cold, in pain, anxious. It's how we experience all our other senses. We only know that we're experiencing our body because we experience the cue of it, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like an intermediary between all of them. It's a very important one. Essentially, if somebody's struggling with alexithymia, that means that their interoception awareness could be improved on. They're struggling to understand what all of these body signals are. And yeah, does anybody have any questions on any of this stuff so far?
There's some comments in the chat about sort of the ADHD, autistic people, and motion sickness overlap. And a shout out to Kelly Mahler, who's credited on your slide right now. We have the interoception curriculum, and Mar was commenting that they use it in therapy all the time.
That wasn't planned, but yeah, Kelly Mahler is really cool. And really that's kind of a guide for how I'm hoping we can look at all of the systems.
Hey, Liana, Jen has a question about the curriculum, and if it's helpful for young adults as well.
The Kelly Mahler's?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I always preface it with people by saying it's going to seem really basic, but it's not really basic. It's just that we don't talk about a lot of really basic stuff. So all of the language, it has a lot of visuals. I would say you could use it with kids really easily and more not adapted to older people. It's very relevant, but none of the language is going to be a barrier. If, would you agree with that, Marie?
Yeah, I think it's good for the whole lifespan.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
every tool coming in and using it, especially with our neurodivergent population, is really specific in that interaction. But I think that the skills are across the lifespan, especially for those of us who have been masking for our whole lives and now trying to figure out how to unmask and identity formation and listen to our bodies.
Yeah, what they said. All right. Oh, and then we get into the planning part. So this is where I'm gonna use those visuals that we talked about earlier to explain how I use a sensory lens in my practice. Really, because I think this is the quickest way for me to give you guys insight into what I'm referring to, so you can ask me questions. So let's try it out. Going back to the nervous system diagram, this is what I'm picturing when somebody's talking to me. And I want to know, what is their current state? What is their desired state? A big thing, any state could be the correct state. It's just, is it most helpful to you right now? So when somebody's talking, that's what I'm keeping in mind. You're telling me you're anxious. Okay, maybe that could be up here. But then you're also telling me about feeling really open-minded. So that sounds like it could be done here. And noting that sometimes people are going to be experience a lot of different things, right? They might say, they very likely will say at some point, I'm depressed and anxious. Okay, yeah, that's super possible. I get it. Then we want to look at recharge versus discharge. So if somebody's saying, I am anxious and I want to be grounded, well, what do they need to get from here to here? So really, we just want to use our senses as a tool. Do I need some more alerting input to get me engaged and get me into something like a movement activity where now I can discharge some of that excess energy I have? Or do I need calming input, something like the ocean to go sit and breathe and really just recharge, unwind? All of these are going to be not an either or, somewhere in between, but they're just helpful kind of, what is it, like scales that I like to keep in mind to track what's going on with people. The other thing we want to look at is overstimulation versus understimulation. We talk about overstimulation a lot. Understimulation is very much an issue too. Um, Sometimes people are going to need more sensory input to stay engaged. If they don't have that, they're not going to be able to be present in this moment, and now their brain gets to have fun making them nervous about what they have to do later today. And then the last part, capacity. I'm going to talk about that more on the next slide. If somebody is in that hypoarousal state, we know they have less capacity. However, we're going to define that. Essentially, we want to figure out in that situation what would help you feel safe and or more comfortable in your body. With that, we want to focus on those lower tiers in that Taylor-Trott pyramid. So we really want to look at sensory regulation. And within the sensory regulation, we want to look at proprioception specifically because we know it's harder to overstimulate that system. And it's one of the more base things, right? It's proprioception, vestibular, tactile. I don't know how much to put into that as like that divide, but I know proprioception is a big one that we can't overload. So that's where I tend to focus. And then we just want to make it easier to meet basic needs. And then also use reliable supports if we're in a lower capacity. This is not the time to try out the new scary things. If somebody says they have higher capacity, that's when now we can look at maybe more of those creative thinking interventions, more socializing, trying new scary things in line with their values, and exploring new tools. So what would help you get to your long-term goals? And yeah, those are the different variables that I like to keep in mind when working with somebody. Now we'll get into the example. So in this case, somebody comes to me, and also all of this, I'm going to make some assumptions because, we have limited time. Assume that I've talked to this person for a very long time and these are all their words and we've, figured it all out. But when I'm getting to know them, the big things I'm noticing about them is they really like singing, playing guitar, listening to music, drawing, bird watching, and weighted blankets. They really don't like loud places, alarm clocks, bright lights, swinging, and heights. And they're struggling with chronic anxiety. They want to stop hitting their head when they're overstimulated, and they're not meeting productivity expectations at work since going back into the office. Does anyone want to take any kind of idea, have fun with this? Like, what would you do with this? Or should I just get into what I do, and then we could do you guys after?
Lianna, there's a question in the chat before you
Mhm.
move on, which is, what do you mean when you say that we can't overload on proprioception?
Such a good question. Yeah. So it's that parent analogy, really. Even if somebody, okay. So I'll speak to me specifically. One of my big regulation tools is going to be music and sound. I find it very dysregulating if there's an irritating sound near me. Most of the time, I can go and use sound as a way, get pleasant sound as a way of regulating my nervous system. But if I've been in a situation where I've just been hearing really loud or the baby crying, my friend's staying with me and she has her baby and the baby has been crying for 24 hours now, has only stopped for 3 minutes. There is no amount of pleasantness that a noise could be that's going to make me want to hear more noise. All I want is headphones so I can hear nothing. I'm just tired of noise. We see that a lot with touch too. Um, you might be somebody that's very physical, really likes touch, but you've had a little kid touching you all day, and it doesn't matter how much you love your partner, you just don't want them touching you. You just don't want anything touching you. That can happen with all of our systems, but it's a lot harder to do that with proprioception. And that's only with pleasant. But so that's where I say if you're having a pleasant experience with proprioceptive input, so you're experiencing your body in a pleasant way, it's hard to get to a point of I've just been having so much fun experiencing my body for so long that now I don't want to anymore. Does that make sense?
I asked the question. I think I need to let it digest and sit a little bit more before I understand, I think, all of what you're naming. So if I have any follow-ups, I will ask. But thank you so much for that explanation.
Of course. Yeah, please do. It's definitely a thinker. Um, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I had a thought, and it makes sense what you're saying. Thanks so much for sharing it. And I'm wondering, coming from my own experience, where like other things coexist, like tendency toward chronic pain. So if I do too much or in certain ways of my favorite proprioceptive activities, then like I get in a chronic pain trigger, and then that's too much for my body. So I'm wondering how that relates to what you're talking about.
So that's the big caveat is what any type of pleasant input can become unpleasant if you've been experiencing it for too long, if you've been experiencing too much of it, or maybe just, I would really like this if there wasn't five other noises, but there are five other noises, so I don't want an extra one. So with chronic pain, it's going to be one of those big factors that's going to change what you might have typically found as really pleasant proprioceptive input. Now it's triggering that chronic pain. And even if this is pleasant, the chronic pain is more unpleasant than the pleasantness. So now we're not talking about a pleasant experience anymore. And that's really the big thing with all of this, where it is so variable. What you experience as pleasant in one situation might not be the same the next day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Of
So
course.
everything in context.
Yes,
Definitely.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, if you take away anything from this, everything in context. I
Meg,
saw somebody else. Mm-hmm.
do you have something?
Me?
Oh, I wanted to add to that if that's appropriate at this time.
Please. Yeah.
Um, just something that like I think for me has been helpful with explaining proprioception to clients and just to other people. Um, just to tease it out, all of these things overlap, of course, but to tease it out from interoception a little bit, whereas interoception might cover more like the overall internal experience of your body, your ability to register your internal sensations. Proprioception, the actual receptors being more commonly present in joints as well as muscles, but that you can target proprioceptive input most effectively through like heavy work, like even things like pushing your hands together, pushing your feet on the ground, and that like taps into proprioceptive input more specifically, like targets that. And that not only do people not tend to get as overloaded by that, it tends to be more organizing for more people. So like we're all different in how we process all of our sensations, but it tends to be the most close to like universally organizing input. So if you're frozen or you're understimulated, it can kind of gently help to activate you. And if you're like really overstimulated and like think of like the hyper kid on the jungle gym, which is fun, but then if it gets to the point where it's just like a little dysregulated, like some proprioceptive input can be calming in a way where you're still able to like move your body and honor that need. So, anyways, I don't know if that helps, but it's a way for me at least that I kind of tease that out a little bit.
I'm so glad that was recorded because I'm gonna memorize exactly what you said. Yes, thank you so much. If you guys have stuff to share like that, please. That's so awesome.
I just want to give a big shout out to Megan and just OT in general. I will say that when I doing all of this work, the scope of mental health practice was completely separating the head and body, and I just went to OTs and honestly some SLPs and was like, "Oh my gosh, you have this dearth of research that's just magical." And that's how I started my whole mental health practice was really on the backs of OTs, and so I'm so happy to have you with us.
I
We
agree
have a
completely.
question.
I'm like fainting over here. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. I love that. Oh.
I
Um,
really only started doing this because I knew OTs that were awesome, and then I didn't have OTs to talk to as much anymore. Yeah.
um,
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to sidetrack too much in here, but what's funny about this, being us like neurodivergent professionals too, is that Liana, you and I have emailed and we were going to consult on this, and then we both forgot. And then I saw you and I was like, wait, were we emailing? So I found our thread and I'm going to email you after this.
Amazing. Okay, I've done that with multiple people. I'm like, I know it's there somewhere, and I really want it. Thank you.
We got it.
That's
okay,
amazing.
we have a comment and then a question. So,
Mhm.
Morgan Burdick is jumping on the OT appreciation bandwagon. And Kim has a question, which is maybe we do not have the ability to identify proprioceptive input as easily. I'm wondering if it does affect us at a more subconscious level.
I'm not understand. Wait, can you rewind?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to make a guess about what Kim is asking. And I'm curious, from what I'm understanding is that it's more difficult to identify proprioceptive input. That's the question. Is it more difficult to understand proprioceptive input, and does it affect us more subconsciously than consciously? And so I think that it's sort of getting at what what sensory inputs do we encounter that are readily accessible and easy to see versus ones that we rely more on interoception for. Kim, is that more what you're asking about?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just I was curious about that. I feel like with like auditory input and a lot of other sensory things that it's more easily identifiable, whereas like interoception and proprioception might be it's almost like a more vague, not identifiable type input, and that maybe that I was just curious if you see that as an OT, if that's possibly why it's more difficult to overload and that maybe it's happening at a subconscious level. It's just that we have a harder time identifying it.
I just want to pause for a second because there's a request since we're talking about proprioception, if we could go back to the proprioception slide
Yeah.
before this.
I was planning on giving you guys the whole proprioception packet, and it's not together enough, but I can give that to you guys by like next week. It would be good for me to have a deadline for myself. I have a lot. Yeah, I'll give you guys a bunch of pages on this. But I would love to have Megan answer that question because I don't know the answer and I'm very curious.
That is a good question. And I don't know. I haven't specifically seen that addressed, I think, in research, but I can just say, like, in my opinion, just from like my clinical work and stuff, like I get the sense that I think that might be part of building that sensory lens. So sometimes when I work with people, it's like people are already doing these things. Like we all access our like sensory modulation. You know, we listen to certain music, or like for proprioception, we move our bodies in certain ways, and we're just not always aware that we're doing it and that it's producing a particular result. Because I think many of us are just like, we're more like primed from like, the popularity of CBT and other really cognitive based mental health approaches to like focus more on our thoughts or on the most intense aspects of our emotions, and maybe a little less on like our actual like sensory experiences. So that's just my opinion. I think that might be maybe part of why it's a little harder to identify. And I think we all struggle with embodiment at this point in time too. But yeah, but I don't know if you have other thoughts about that, Liana. That's just I guess my opinion.
I want to think about it more. I don't have any thoughts yet, but I will. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thought. Were there other questions?
Yes. Okay. So I have one more kind of question. I'm really trying to wrap my brain around this, and this is just because I think I'm thinking about it less like in like a pleasant way and more just like as a proprioception and like body awareness as like a neutral thing. And so I think part of what's hard for me is like it's this one example where like if I am trying to bring in groceries and I have 5 bags per bag because I am queer and I have to prove myself. Just kidding. There's nobody else around. It's just me to me. I'm also gonna turn my camera on so you can see my face. So I'm trying to take in 5 bags per hand and it's really heavy. I'm pretty buff. Um, but I am taking it in the house. I get irrationally angry because it's so heavy. I get so mad. I get instantly super like, oh, like I'm infuriated. I don't like it. It feels like too much. There's too much pressure. And so I that's what I'm like trying to wrap my brain around in terms of that of like I guess I would think of that being like an overloaded sense. And
Absolutely.
so okay, can you help me break that down of like
Yeah.
the
So,
yeah.
you know what? I would love to talk about when proprioception is actually not fun at all and when it can be very unpleasant, because that's going to be a lot of the time. Um, so being aware of your body for a lot of people is just inherently not pleasant. This system's really tied into trauma because even if it's something like a massage, where a lot of people are going to say that's an incredible sensation, you love that sensation, it's still making you more aware of your experience in your body. If you don't feel comfortable with that experience, it doesn't matter how pleasant the input is, you're not experiencing it as a pleasant thing,
Mm,
you know? And so I'm not saying that's what's happening here. That's just another example. But that's where it's really about looking at how the person is experiencing it in that context. And that's another one of the big reasons I did this guide is I'm very not good with all of the hypersensitive language that tends to dominate the field because it implies that we're responding to all input the same and we're just extra sensitive or not sensitive enough or whatever. I don't know. We're experiencing each single input differently every single time. And that's where it's just looking at, is this being experienced as pleasant in this situation?
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Megan, do you have anything to add to that? I feel like it might be I'm just excited that I have you on board now, so I'd love your input on all of it.
Oh, sure. Happy to. I was actually just gonna put in the chat that I just think I've been finding in my practice that I think like building specifically interoceptive awareness, if somebody has like quote unquote like lower interoceptive awareness in general, or just like a lot of like discomfort with being in their bodies, to be like just really slow and like the most challenging, I think, work to do. And I think that was a big learning area for me because at first I was just like, let's do these exercises. I've got these Kelly Mahler resources and everything. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay, no, we got to like slow way, way down and be like really build a lot of extra trust. And so
Yeah.
I would be curious if part of it is about like overloading proprioceptive input, like it is too much proprioceptive input, but it almost sounds like part of that is like the interoceptive like foundation of like am I like sensing what is too much and what's not enough moment to moment, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yes, this makes sense. Sorry. I was knitting.
Love it. Should I go to the example again? I would much rather talk if you guys have more questions. That's all right. Oh, did anybody have any thoughts on what they, or should I just say this is how I'm gonna do it? And then we talk about it after. Yeah? Okay. Thanks, Mar. What I'm hearing when I hear this is a lot of auditory. When we're looking at what systems people are experiencing most acutely, you're probably going to see like and dislike, they're going to be there. Which just means when somebody is giving you an overview of what they're interested in, it's going to be helpful to look at what senses do they tend to engage more or less often. So based on this, I'm gonna see they seem to have a more acute relationship with auditory input, both pleasant and unpleasant. Same with visual to an extent. And then I noticed that they are seeking some proprioceptive input. They're able to identify this one experience is really cool, but they're also struggling with vestibular input. Since proprioception and vestibular are so often tied together, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to see, are they able to meet their proprioceptive needs, or is it when they're trying to meet these needs, vestibular gets involved, and now we're dysregulated because of that? It's an area that will be fun to explore with my fake person. And then I'm going back to this. So this is making a lot of assumptions. I'm assuming we've talked a lot, and they've identified, I often feel in this anxious state. It feels bad. I'm hitting myself and not doing well at work. I think it would be better for me to be down there. Right? So now we're looking at current state over here. Desired state's going to be more over here. And then we look at what do they need to get from here to here? Do they need to recharge? Do they need discharge? Do we need calming or alerting input for that? I think that's all I was supposed to say on that slide. And then what we're going to do. So what I'm getting from this is that we're not highest capacity right now, so we're going to prioritize and start with reliable supports and trusted tools. Then we want to focus on the systems that we know are affecting them more. They seem more aware of auditory, visual, and proprioceptive pleasant input, so we're going to focus on that. And how can we get more of that? Megan, you just smiled and like you agreed with me, and I've never felt more validated in my life. So that was fun. Sorry, I'll continue. And then workplace accommodations. I put they went back to work. So something about the office is making it so they're struggling there. Since we know that auditory, visual, vestibular are things they struggle with, we want to look at how can we bring in accommodations. Also, since it was overstimulated, I focused on accommodations. It's going to be support or accommodation. It's never just sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. Everything that's giving us more of one sense is also going to be giving us less of something else, and vice versa. So we really want to look at all of it. I just only had so much room on here. And then we also want to look at how can we increase proprioceptive input without activating the vestibular system as much. So what are those really trusted tools that we could use for that? And the end. Now you guys get to choose what we do next.
Oh, we have a question first.
Please.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I really loved sort of this example and how to break it down into the senses. So many times we have people in our population where it is hitting their head or other types of harm where it's not even like recognized. Like, of course, hitting your head is great proprioceptive stimulation, but maybe there's another form of proprioceptive stimulation that there isn't morality around or possible harm to your head. Okay, so the question is, it seems like you are making a distinction between pleasant, unpleasant, and overstimulation. So with proprioception, is it less likely for a pleasant sensation to become unpleasant because you have reached an overstimulation threshold? But you were not saying that it's unlikely to experience unpleasant proprioception. Am I getting that right?
I think yes, but that's more a reflection of what points I'm trying to emphasize right now than it is of like, this is what a science book would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I asked the
Hey.
I was when I put that in the chat, and I was just kind of trying to, as I'm listening to people ask questions about the proprioception and overstimulation, of trying to like break down these are the distinctions you're making. So when you're talking about you're less likely to overload proprioception. You're not saying you're unlikely to experience something negative with proprioception. It's that it's a sense where if something is generally pleasant, it's
Yeah.
less likely for that stimulation to become unpleasant because you've gone over a threshold. Versus with like sound, where a pleasant sensation becomes unpleasant because you've hit an overstimulation threshold, and then anything is unpleasant.
Yeah. I think it's looking at two kind of separate but similar things. So one is going to be how you're experiencing the input in relation to, or just how you're experiencing all input, right? So let's say at 10 at 10 sounds, I have reached too many sounds. I'm at 9 sounds, one more sound will be fine, but two more I'm out. But then there's also, so there's the amount that would make it unpleasant, but then there's also that you might be experiencing a sensation as pleasant until, and then we get to that duration, frequency, or intensity where now it hurts too much, or it's too quick, or it's too loud, and that makes it unpleasant. Did I make it more confusing? It's very possible. Megan?
Um, I actually just want to like say this is a really great example of two of like in our mental health capacity, we often will bring in sensory and all of these sort of like elements. And I highly recommend that if you have somebody who has some very specific sensory needs or executive functioning or just difficulty doing stuff, that you get an OT on your team and somebody that's neurodiversity affirming. There is a wide range of OTs of being sort of more compliant based versus exploring your body and your world. Um, and that is a huge like gift that you can give your client is just building a team where you don't have to be the expert in everything. Because OT's got a master's degree in specifically this and honestly being magical. So that being said, actually Megan has something to share, a resource for us.
Thank you. I could truly talk about this all day, of course, but I have to leave. I have a client in 5 minutes, so thank you so much, Maria, for letting me pop in. But I've been starting some groups, and I'm starting a free body doubling group. It's going to be weekly. Mara, I just saw your reaction. That makes me happy. So everyone is welcome. It's an easy sign up. You'll just get a link. It'll be the same link every week. Oh, yay, good. Yes. And so I'll put that in the chat. Feel free to any of you want to join or share with anybody. That would be wonderful. And I think that's it. Yeah. So if you have any questions, let me know. I can also put my email, I suppose. So if any questions come up about this or about sensory processing or, oh, yes, Emily asked if we can refer clients to it. Yes, please. I've developed a wait list because my offerings are like, oh, there isn't another OT working with neurodivergent adults who takes insurance in Washington State. So I have a bit of a wait list, and so I started doing groups to try to like meet the needs of people on the wait list. And so I am trying to spread the word about it so that people know, there's like feel like it's a way that I can like kind of meet more people's needs at once. So please do. That would be awesome.
Great. I want to turn it back over to Liana to finish the presentation and just request Megan if you could send me any resources on how to find a good neurodivergent affirming OT. We've got people all over the country and some people internationally. So if you have any like specific places that you recommend, but also just what to look for, that would be really lovely. Um, oh yeah, and Kelly points out that Seattle Therapy Network, where we refer all the time for SLP and OT, they're very neurodiversity affirming. They work with adults via te only telehealth, and they accept all insurances, almost all insurances.
Oh, back to me.
To you.
Um, that was the end. What do you guys want to do next? So, am I sharing part of my screen right now? Sorry, guys. I can go back to full mode. So, we could do what we're doing, question and answer. You can just ask questions about more specific parts in here. We could get into more specific parts. We could do more of a role play where we do what I just did, but together. Or if you guys want to talk about specific cases and how to use a sensory lens with those, we could turn off the recording and do that. Anyone? Anyone?
There is a request for case application role play.
Okay, I'm in.
I'm curious if Emily, if you would like to participate in that, and if you would like it to be on or off camera.
Yes, I will love to participate, and I would prefer off camera, please, or off recording.
Anybody else have any requests that otherwise I'm going to end the recording and we can do a role play. Thank you all so much.